Welcome back, learners, to another session of another e-learning session from Brainfully, and today's topic is MySQL. So this is basically one of the modules of the major course that we were talking about was the Introduction to World Wide Web Technologies. So as you remember from last time, a website or a web application nowadays is a very complex structure. It consists of server-side scripting, client-side scripting, and a huge set of infrastructure called servers, web servers, proxy servers, and different things. Along with that, a very important component is a database system. So nowadays, any web service or any software service which runs on a website or any service has to deal with data. So it's all about information service. So be it a banking system, be it a library management system, be it a uh, video site like YouTube, be it Facebook, be it a travel website like yatra.com or anything. So all these websites have to deal with data. So there's a huge amount of data and a huge amount of transactions going on. For example, take a small example of a hotel. So say there's a hotel, someone started their hotel, they want to create a website. So yes, they can create a static website. So they can get the website designed, they can put up a page where it will be all statically written, like what are the rates, rooms available, what are the tariffs of the room, and other things. But if you want to integrate e-commerce to it, integrate e-commerce means if you want customers to come and check which are the rooms actually available from a date to a particular date, and you want them to integrate with payment gateway so that they can book your rooms online. So you have to maintain all these records, all these transactions. Maintenance means you have to should be able to save them, and you should be able to retrieve them back. You should be able to generate reports out of it, and ultimately manage that data, like which room is booked from which date to which date. So all these things we had already seen briefly in the last section of PHP, where we had seen how we can interact PHP with MySQL. In this section, we will be looking at it in little more detail, like why MySQL or what is MySQL and what it is all about. So MySQL is a database system that is mostly used for websites or on servers. So if I talk a little bit about the history, so database systems started way back, very back. It started from the times of DOS, when there was MS-DOS. So there were software like DBase, database. There were softwares like FoxPro, and then people used to write or save data in files like in Excel sheets or in text files, or there were dedicated languages like COBOL, which were specifically designed for business operations, where they allow user to maintain the or save the records in databases in its own proprietary databases. But with a company called Oracle, they first created something called a SQL server. So although there were databases, for example, FoxPro was a database, but it has its own way of interaction. It also had a language with which you can create data, you can pull things out, you can even create entire applications on FoxPro. But what did Oracle did is they brought in a concept called SQL. So SQL is like they brought in a concept of this intermittently language called structured query language. And what then they did with SQL is like SQL now then became the abstract. So you can write anything on SQL, and then you can run it on any SQL supported servers. So Oracle was the first to come up with it. Then someone started an open source project called MySQL. This was open source, and later on it was sold to Java. And then finally when Java was acquired by Oracle, so currently MySQL is property of Oracle, although it is still available as an open source. So what does that mean is you can free freely downloaded. Even if you wish, you can freely download the source code. You can build, and because it is open source, it has been contributed by a lot of developers. So that's why it's very stable. It's very platform independent. MySQL can be run on Windows. It can be run on Linux, Mac, Solaris, and other operating systems. And it's been highly used again because of its open source, and even the big companies like even Facebook runs on MySQL. But again, this is not the only SQL server. Other SQL options are, there is a MSSQL server. You can use, there is another open source variation of MySQL that is known as PGSQL, PostgreSQL. And then there is a very lightweight version of a SQL version that is called SQLite, which is normally used by embedded systems like mobile phones and set-top boxes to store very small kind of database inside it. But that is a kind of a ecosystem where we can have SQL running, and traditionally PHP has a very strong association with MySQL. So they have very good inbuilt functions to handle MySQL. So that's why MySQL is specifically very popular with the PHP developers. So as you can see in this slide very quickly, it's free. It's free to download and use. It is developed and distributed previously by a company called MySQL, then it was acquired by Java, but now it is done by Oracle, and it is still free. Not sure till when it will be free. It was founded by Monty Windels and he gave the name on his daughter name. So My was actually the name of the daughter of Monty Windels. And since actually when he initially like, just a little bit about the history is like, Oracle wanted to buy MySQL from some time, because MySQL was one of the major competitors of Oracle's own database. But the founder didn't wanted to sell it. So, but because again it was open source, and maybe because they were not able to sustain it properly, they sold it to Java, because Java is also not Java as such, the Sun Microsystems, because Sun Microsystems was also known for support for their open source things, like Java was open source and all. So they gave it to Java, and finally Oracle bought Sun Microsystems. So they got MySQL along with it. But it said that the founder, Monty, was not very happy with it. So he started another branch of this program called MySQL, and now he named it on his wife, that is known as MyRead. So there is another one-to-one replacement of MySQL known as MyRead SQL. But I'm not sure how far that will go, but just for the sake of history. So it's a server which supports the standard SQL, plus it gives a lot of its own facilities also. It is fast, reliable, and easy to use. It is also being very heavily used by the small developers like us, but other than that, it's also very heavily used by the enterprise. Like, for example, I gave Facebook, it's known to be running on MySQL, although they are facing some issues. It's ideal for both small and large applications, and it is a database server. So how does MySQL stores the things? So what happens is, if I just look at the architecture kind of thing, so there is a big box. So it's a logical transparent box for server, SQL server, and then some application. It can be PHP, it can be C#, it can be ASP, it can be anything. They communicate with this server to and fro using SQL. So this communication can be local, it can be over the network, it can be based on a TCP IP or anything. And this box, so this is a logical, it can be a separate system, it can be a set of systems, or it can be a small system with the application also. So it can be local database, it can be a remote database, it can be a cluster of databases. So for example, if it is a very small website, so what we do is we keep MySQL server, the software running same with the web server. So you can have it running on the same system as a web server. Or if it is a big application like something like Facebook and all, so what they have something called a server farm. It's like a big room, a really big room, or it can be even more than one room, and there are hundreds of servers running, and all are running some piece of some software, and they collectively create a big SQL server farm, where like a few servers are the front end which interact with the application, and there is a huge set of backend servers which are storing the data, searching the data, sorting the data, and keep them all in place. So it can be a huge enterprise setup also. But whatever it is, for application it is one big entity, like one server. And then these servers have small boxes, different boxes called databases. So one server can host more than one database. So database is again a logical entity of information. It is like one box. For example, on a computer there can be a lot of different hard disks. So even say you have only physically one hard disk, but you can divide it into multiple volumes or drives. So a database can be a drive inside a SQL server. Then each database, if I kind of zoom it, if I show you zoomed out, then each database is a set of tables. Each database is a set of tables. What is a table? Table is something like a sheet, a document, which contains rows and columns. So think it as a system. So say I have a desktop system and I have different files. So each file can be a database. For example, I have different Excel files. So each Excel file is a database. Then in each Excel file I will have more than one sheet. So I will have lot of different sheets. So here each sheet is like one table, and table is a rectangular grid with fixed columns. So table has, whenever we design a table, we can create n number of tables, and whenever we create a table, it will have fixed set of columns. Fixed means fixed for the time being. I can add and delete columns, but once it is defined, every row will have some value for that column. So normally it will have a table like say students, and then it will have a fixed columns, say name, class, gender, roll number. So it will have fixed set of columns, and then it will have n number of records. So it will have thousands and thousands of records. It can be 5-10 records also, but normally like one table will have infinite list of records. Like we can keep on adding records to this list. So this is how a database system is constructed. And then these collection of tables, related tables associated with each other, complete the information. For example, let's take again this example of school only. So I can have a database called school, and inside that school I can have a list of sections, a list of classes, a list of teachers, a list of students. So these are all my different Tables. Ideally, I will not have a separate list for separate classes. Instead, what I will do is I will keep a big list of students, mark a table called class, and then later on I will query based on that field, and I can extract out a set of students from a big list of students. So that's how we manage the data. So we'll see about that later on. So this is how we design a database, and it is especially very useful in storing information categorically, because we store it in tables. And then we can, for example, another example is like a company can have a database called employees, products, customers, and orders. So, okay, so we talk about the server. That server holds all these things. How do we use it? So, how do we use it is definitely server is installed and up and running. But server is actually meant to be running in background, because normally all database systems are part of web servers, websites, or other applications. So they normally don't give you access to the file system directly. It doesn't work as a MS Word or MS Excel, where you directly open the file and edit it. Definitely there are some lightweight servers, like lightweight SQL engines. For example, SQLite, where you actually save it in one file. So you can just open that file with SQLite and you can edit it. But normally MySQL and others, you cannot go and find your data directly into the files, because MySQL uses its own way of storing them. So what we do is we use clients to connect to this server and then see the data and manipulate the data. So there are a lot of clients, but few of the more prominent one is the MySQL console. So this is the basic bare minimum raw console. It opens like in a command prompt box, and it gives you a prompt like MySQL ankle. There you can write the command and it will display the result. Then there is another console or a client called PHP MyAdmin. So this is again an open source client. Basically not even a client, this is a GUI that is made using PHP. It gives you a very nice graphical user interface where you can use your mouse, you can right click and say create new table, create new database, and you can do all those fancy things. Internally it will run appropriate SQL commands only. So in the console what we need to do, console will give you just a black and white prompt where you have to manually write the commands yourself. But in PHP MyAdmin it will give you a GUI where you can just use the mouse and graphically do the prompts, and it also gives you the command, the SQL statement which it has run to do that, so that you can actually copy them, you can use them and use them back in your programs. So you can do all those things programmatically also. Then there is another very nice feature GUI console that is called as MySQL Workbench. So MySQL Workbench is again a GUI from MySQL. It is a Windows or a like desktop based console. It also connects to the SQL server and gives you a graphical ability to create database, create user, destroy user, and other things. Other than that, there are few more consoles, or you can use the APIs, MySQL APIs, and create your own console. So here we won't go much about in console. We will be mostly focusing on the SQL as a language. But going forward, I will show you both the MySQL console and PHP admin. So let's move forward. What is PHP MyAdmin? Just to get into a little more detail. This is a free open source tool written in PHP. Most probably if you have a shared hosting, you will get PHP MyAdmin already installed, and it works on web. It works through web browser, so it's very easy to use. You don't have to log into the server remotely, or you don't have to expose any particular port. You just need to have it installed on that server, and you can open it from web browser remotely. You can perform all sort of tasks, such as you can execute any SQL statement, you can manage users and permission, create, delete tables, files, fields, anything. We will see a lot of this going forward. Another thing is, as I mentioned, it is a database management system, and it is like being implemented at a very industrial level. Means it's a big system. It's not just a small file system. So one of the major advantages of using a SQL server is it not only stores the data, it also protects the data. So it has its own privileges system. It has its own mechanism to give you access to the system. As I said, although you can go and find the files, where the files are stored in the system, but if you open that, you will not be able to see anything into it, and you will definitely be able to manipulate any data into it, and it is very strongly protected, many times encrypted. So how it handles is, as I mentioned, that we need to connect to the server using a client, and while connecting, we also have to authenticate the user. It will not let anyone to just connect and just take the data out. The user has to be authenticated with a username and a password. So while it is there, it gives you additional privileges also. For example, the user can have administrative privileges. What does that mean? It means that user who has these privileges can not only access the data, he can also create new users. He can grant and revoke permissions of other users. Then there are database privileges. Database privileges means the permission to user with respect to the database. So again, as I mentioned, because nowadays a lot of shared hosting infrastructure is coming up. So what is shared hosting is that I don't own a web server, because keeping a web server up and running, especially a high-end web server up and running, is costly. A minimum web server, if you have to rent for your own exclusively a dedicated web server, a minimum rent starts from $400 a month. So that's a big amount. So what people do for a small scale website is they share the server. So they share the server, the storage space. For example, a normal website normally size between 10 to 100 MB. You won't have a website more than 100 MB. But a lowest quality desktop systems of nowadays comes with minimum 500 GB hard disk. They come with 1000 Mbps LAN connection. But say you will have only 10 users in a day. Why you need such a high-end machine up and running? So what you can do is you can share that server with say 10 other websites. So there will be 10 different more websites running on your system. They will be sharing your resources, and they will be using that system, including maybe the SQL server installation that you have done. But if you share that, then there is a chance that other websites can see your data. So how you can protect that? You can create users, different users on the same server for different applications, and then you can assign them separate database privileges. So separate database privileges means the user will have privilege to only a particular database. He will not have access to other database. So this will not only hide the data, it will also prevent that user from modifying the data of someone else's data, basically. So you can have say 50 databases on one web server. You can create 50 different users, and you can assign one database to each user, so that they will be normally accessing their own database. They will not be mingling with someone else's database. So we will see that also in action. Third is privileges related to database object. So not only database, you can restrict the user to a particular object also. You can restrict the user to a particular table, that this table data is available only to this user, or this particular user can see data from only this table. And not only the object, he can have other permissions like whether he will be allowed to modify it, will he be allowed to edit it. So all these operations, insert, modify, select, everything we can control at a database object level permission. So we can have users who are like full read only. They can go and they can only read the data, but they cannot manipulate it. So all these things we can do in MySQL by applying different privileges to the users. How they are implemented? Internally, within the MySQL, there is a special database called MySQL. And there are different tables like table level privilege, column level privilege, host, which is nowadays not used, it's obsolete. But there are DB level privileges, and the users. Who are the users? Their credential, their password, who are they allowed? So these are special tables, procedure level privileges, which are stored in a special database called MySQL database within the server, which normally only the root has access, or any user who has administrator privileges. And in these tables there is special information written which allows the server itself to read and control the permission or the access to which the user is able to take the actions. But normally we don't go and change these permissions directly. Advanced database administrators may do that, may decide to do that, or may create tools to do that more efficiently. But the SQL or MySQL gives you specific commands to let user a particular privilege, or to grant or revoke a particular privilege from a user. So this is again a quick example. Here we create a new user with a command called create user, and then we give the user identification. So it's like Jeffrey at localhost, means this is a particular user who will be accessing from localhost only, from local system only. Identified by, this is again a keyword, and password, a particular password. So here the user will be created. Okay, again MySQL is case insensitive, so you can write the commands in small or capital, but just to separate it from the other things, I have made it capital here. So the first line creates the user, then we use the command grant. So these are three different examples. So in first example I am saying grant all on db1.star to Jeffrey at localhost, means the database 1 give all the permissions to Jeffrey at localhost, so he can use it, all the things, all the tables, but only in database 1. The second example is select on db2.invoice to Jeffrey. So here I am saying grant only select on db2.invoice. On db2.invoice, so on db2.invoice I am allowing Jeffrey only to use select. He cannot use insert or update or any other things. And in the third example, I am restricting the Jeffrey with a maximum query per. So I am telling him a usage limit, that Jeffrey is a user, he can do on star.star, like on any database or object, with a maximum query per hour 90. He can run maximum 90 queries per hour. So this is the usage permission. So here we will take a quick example. We will have a quick demo and we will see how we can use these things, and then we will take a break after the demo. So let's have the demo. Here I am using the MySQL server that is installed with the WAMP. So last time we were using WAMP, and WAMP is that Windows Apache MySQL PHP. It comes with MySQL installed with it. Other than that, you can also go to mysql.net and you can explicitly download the MySQL installer separately and have it installed. So I go to WAMP server and say start WAMP server. So once it goes green, I can click on this and see MySQL, and notice MySQL service, and it is the start service is disabled. That means it is running. The start service is enabled. That means the service is up and running. I can directly go to the console from here. I can just say my console. So when I use this console, by default it takes me to the user called root, ROOT root. That is the default console. And the default password for MySQL which is installed with WAMP is blank. It's empty. I can just press enter. It says welcome and I am inside. But if you have installed MySQL separately, so while installation it will ask you a database password. So if you have installed it yourself, or if the system administrator has installed, please go and find out the database server's password. So here I am in the MySQL ankle is here and I have logged in as root. So what I can do here is I can see a list of all the databases. So let's try. So to see the list of all databases, we have a command called show databases semicolon. Semicolon is used to terminate the command. Enter. So it gives a list of database. So it says database, I have information underscore schema, I have MySQL, I have performance underscore schema, a database known as SchoolDB, and a database name as test. Let's go and see inside MySQL. So I say use. So we will see more detail about these commands again, but just to give you a just basic detail. So I say use MySQL semicolon. It says database changed. Now I say show me all the tables. So I say show tables semicolon. So it gives you a list of all the tables which MySQL have. So remember from the slide that there is a user. So there is a table called users. Let's see what it contains. So I say select star, like select everything from user semicolon, enter. So here it shows all the details inside the user table. So user table contains host, user, password, select privileges, insert privileges, update privileges, delete privileges, and other privileges it contains. So for example, there is like localhost root. So it's showing there is a user name as root and localhost as the host. Another user root and IP address 127.0.1.1 as the root. Another user root with ::1 as host. Then host name. Then there is a user called school user with host, local host, and this is the password. So this is not exactly the password. This is encrypted password. It has been encrypted. It has been hashed. Then that's all. So let's create a user. So let's say create space user space single quote name of the user. I say test user 1. I want him to be able to access the system locally. So I say @localhost. Then I say identified by and then single quote password. So for password I say 12345. I just give it a password, or say 123 semicolon. It says query okay, 0 rows affected. It says nothing is affected, but query is okay. Let's select star from user again. See, it has added localhost test user 1 and some password. It's again a encrypted password. Now let's try to log in with this user and see what happens. So I cannot directly use this prompt from here because it will try to log me as root only. I want to log in as test user 1. I want to log in as test user 1. Password 123. So what I do is I start command prompt. And from here I go to vamp bin MySQL MySQL 5.6.12. You can have a different version. Bin, and then I say MySQL space -u for user, and I say test user 1. Then I say -p, that I will enter a password. I say enter. It says enter password 123. Enter. I am inside MySQL. Now let me say show databases semicolon enter. Now see, it shows me only 2 databases. It doesn't shows me the database called MySQL. It doesn't shows me the database called schools. Let's see here. Show databases. It has information schema, MySQL, performance schema, school DB, test. But here it has only test. So test is a test database pre-created by MySQL, which is available to everyone. So there is no permissions in that. So test is by default available. Information schema is also available. It contains about the information about the schema. So like what other databases are there and other things. So it will be available. But other than that, no extra database is available. So let's grant him some permission. So I say, let me see in SchoolDB what it has. So let me say use SchoolDB. Sorry, school_db. Show tables. It has one table called students. Say So I'm selecting some data from students. It has ID, first name, second name, class, section, age. And here on this system I am the root user, so I can go and I can modify anything and delete anything and all the things. But I want to get the test user 1 permission only to select this, only to view this. So let's do it. I say select grant, grant, grant select on school DB dot school DB dot students to test user 1 at localhost. 0 rows affected. If I go here and I say show databases, so now see it has the school DB available to him. I say OK, use school DB, show tables. It has one table, students, it can see it. Select star from students. Yes, it can select. Let's try to delete something here. Delete from students where ID equal to 8. Error. Delete command is denied to user. User test user doesn't have a permission to run delete on students because he has permission only to select. So this is how we can assign permissions. We can create databases, we can delete a lot of things and other things. So here we will take a short break, and as you have seen that I have already used a lot of commands. So till now we have not talked about commands. We have talked only two commands called create user and grant and other things. So after the break we will actually go back and see what are these commands, what we did with that, what are all other things we can do. We will also see the PHP MyAdmin, how to use that and how to handle your database. So with that we will take a short break for now.